and give me this opportunity. Thank you for having me and give me the opportunity to see you all. We're going to talk about John Dee, Dr. John Dee, and Sir Edward Kelley. Talk about who they were, what they did, and what their legacy is. Um, each of the three areas, we could quite easily do a separate session on each one, probably more, to be honest. So we're going to have a cursory run through, and hopefully I might throw up a few ideas that are a bit different to what other people have taken upon themselves to explain. There's quite a bit of Enochian material around these days, as I'm sure you would all know. Dee, John Dee, born 1527, died 1608. Kelley is was he born 1555, dies 1595. John Dee's family are from off the Welsh border here, actually not far from where I'm living here. I suspect because his grandfather Bedo Dee from Nantygroes, which is a little hamlet with a church at Pilleth. As I say, not that far from here. He was standard bearer for Edward Tudor, not Edward Tudor, Henry Tudor, Henry VII. And he was his main man on the Welsh border here. Once they've all gone to the court, they anglicised their name from the double D U to D, and there was a lot of Tudor Welsh families that anglicised their names too. Cecil's being one of them. So they were established at court and they had the right connections. D, in some sense, was a man who was beyond his own time. He was a linguist. He was a cartographer, geographer, mathematician, astrologer, man into the occult. He was the guy that you consulted if you was an explorer to check that your maps were right and to give you advice about the tides and the astronomy of the day so that you could guide your ship. He was in great demand. What happens is that Elizabeth I, when she was simply just Elizabeth Tudor, she basically under house arrest by her sister Mary, who was of course Catholic and burning Protestants, and she asked Dee whether she's ever going to be queen. Well, he puts this chart together and tells her when she is going to be queen and she's going to have this long and glorious reign, and her sister Mary would be dead in 3 years' time. But of course, to predict the length of the reign of the monarch was considered treason. And subsequently, Dee finds himself imprisoned. Although, having said that, some of us up here on the Welsh border here were predicting 3 months before the last queen died that she was going to die in the second week of September, and lo, she did. So technically, that was going to be treason. But we also worked out when how long Liz Truss was going to last, although it was pushing an open door because it's quite clear she wasn't going to last long. But anyway, I digressed there. But to get back to Dee, once Elizabeth is on the throne, once she becomes queen, shall I say, Dee becomes the main man in the sense that he's her advisor, personal astrologer, picks the time for her coronation, which quite clearly he obviously got right because, I mean, the reign was something rather quite spectacular. And amongst all this, Dee is pushing for knowledge, and he comes to the conclusion that his occult studies will give him the knowledge that he requires, and that he can drill down, shall I say, into the mind of God to find all manner of things, and that the angels and various spiritual creatures were there to aid him. So he's using various people to scry into the showstone while he's conjuring up various angels and spirits, one hue and another. And he's using one character called Barnabas Saul, who with whom he has some success. But everything takes off in a dramatic fashion, and this is 1582 when Edward Kelley turns up, or Edward Talbot. He was from Worcester, although I have heard it suggested that he came from the Clee Hills in South Shropshire. Don't know about that one, but seemingly his background was from an apothecary. He had a strong interest and practice in the alchemical art, which is something I want to run past you in shortly. And he turns up at Dee's house at Mortlake, and basically, cut a long story short, Dee takes him on for his services. And at this point, Kelly's being paid £80 a year, which would be quite a lot of money back in those recent times. So the first session that they have was so intense that Dee's sort of blown away by it all. And this goes on, and they are scrying several hours a day trying to contact angels. What happens is that there's an angel that turns up as a young girl, Medimi, and she starts talking about various villages in South Shropshire, which is a bit of a strange thing, seeing that they're in Mortlake. And she's talking about the connection between the Mortimers, who from whom Edward IV came from, and their connections ultimately with Lasky, who was a Polish prince who had a claim on the Polish throne. Now, as Chappie Lasky turns up, he'd been to the court of Elizabeth, and he beats a path to the door of Dee, and he becomes involved with some of their angelic conjurations. Now, the angels, according to Medimi, had pointed out to Dee that Lasky was going to come and see them, and he pointed out to them that there's various people at the court who want to get rid of Dee, and one of them was Walsingham, who was basically Elizabeth I's spy master. Now, what's going on is that these sessions of scrying and conjuring angels were getting so intense, and Dee had his library, and he had his life and his family all at Mortlake. The last thing he wanted to do was leave and go anywhere. And one of his scrying sessions, or several of his scrying sessions, to be more accurate, resulted in a work called Heptamachia, the Book of Seven Mysteries, where they talk about the angels that are related to 7 days of the week and their potencies and their powers. And he is being promised to be given the keys how to work with them. So he's well into his work with Kelley. Now, what happens is that Medimi convinces them that they've got to leave and go with Lasky to Poland. And if they don't go, their lives are going to be under threat. So what happens is that they make a bolt for a ship they've got lined up in the middle of the night, a couple of carriages, taking the wives, families, but of course they're taking the servants. It wasn't a question of saying like you got 20 minutes, pack a suitcase. There was a lot of stuff to go and a lot of organizing. So they go off Lasky into Europe and eventually make their way over to Krakow. And the angels are doing these scrying sessions as they're going along. And ultimately they're being told that they'll be given a book, Logar it's called, or spelled Logarth. Um, and this was going to be the key to the angelic language, which they will require. Now, this is a book that has the calls in what we know as like the Enochian calls and what have you. And they were going to be taught how to use them and what to do with them. So while they're in Poland, there is a message from one of the angels that turns around and says, you've got to go to Rudolph, who is the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in Prague. And that you've got to give him this message that basically he's got to mend his ways, or God's going to put his boot against the chest of the emperor and push him off his throne. Well, Kelley is Dee rather perturbed about this. How on earth can I go and give a message like this? And he ignores it. But they come back, and the angels come back, and they tell him that he's to go and do this, and they chide him for not doing it. Then they start threatening all manner of things if he doesn't go and do it. So he goes to Rudolph, gives him the message, and Rudolph is rather stunned, but takes it on board. And instead of Dee and Kelley thinking this is going to be for the chop, he makes provision for them to stay at his court and study alchemy and things that they were doing. So Dee and Kelley are finally ensconced somewhere safe where they can simply get on with their work. Now, Kelley's real work that he's really interested in is the alchemical art. When I talk about the alchemical art, I'm not really talking about at all about how things have drifted into this new age sort of alchemical waffle. This is hardcore, practical laboratory alchemy. And we can see this when Kelley says somewhere, and I can't quite remember where it was now, where he says, after supper, I went off to distill some Sericon. Now, this line perhaps doesn't mean much to a great deal of people who might have read it over the years, but for me, it tells me a lot, because it's quite clear that what they were doing, or what Kelley was doing, was following the instructions in a text that was written by Sir George Ripley, who was a canon of Bridlington in 1492. And it starts off talking about a toad that is bloated. He writes this long alchemical poem, like as a riddle. Well, Kelley must have deciphered it and worked out what was being said. Because basically, what's happening is that Kelley is working with what's deemed to be the wet way via humidia rather than the dry way, which is simply done with fire. And what he's clearly doing is that he's taking vinegar, which is created from soured wine, basically, but it's a live vinegar, so it'll have the mother in it. And he's distilling the acetate spirit out of it by freezing it. Well, that can only be done in the winter. These days you can do it in the freezer, but obviously they weren't around back in Tudor times. So we'd have to be doing it in the winter by sticking a barrel outside and when it's going to be a frosty night, drilling a hole into the ice and draining the spirit out, because the water in the vinegar will freeze before the acetate acid will. So there's a little bit of chemistry with this, but it's live chemistry in many respects. Subsequently, he's probably done this a couple of 3 times to sharpen it, and ultimately he's put his liquid, which is his fixed mercury of the vegetable kingdom. And what he's doing, he's taking the rest of it, all the things that are left over, drying them off, and then he'll set light and burn them, which is calcination, until he gets to a white ash, and then he'll soak it with water to get the salts out. and ultimately he'll end up with a white salt that if he leaves outside under a full moon, it'll suck the moisture out the air, so the salts become living salts full of the life force of creation. And then he'll run it through with the distilled vinegar. So he's now got a philosophical vegetable mercury. Yes, fixed vegetable mercury. Then he gets the galena, which is the lead ore, which would be the toad that Ripley's referring to. And then that's all pounded up and smashed up, get it as small as you can. That's roasted at a low temperature for days on end, probably about 100, 200 Fahrenheit. And the idea is that you're burning off all the toxins, the arsenic, sulfurs, and anything else is rather dubious. And ultimately, his fixed vegetable mercury is then poured onto the lead ore that he's been roasting, and you put it in a flask, and it's going to be kept warm to digest at about 40 centigrade. Well, the way they would have done it was to get a big pile of horse shit and bury it in the middle, because as it ferments and breaks down, it's keeping warm all the time. And this would have stayed there for several months. You probably might have had to use more than one pile. And ultimately, there'll become a growth, which is the acetate growth. And it'll start off like white, and it'll have pink and red and gold streaks into it. And this acetate, he would have, when he ultimately got it, is his sericon, which is what he's referring to. And he would have taken it out of the flask, and he would put it into another flask and subject to it to a gentle heat. And the heat would start driving over the water, which is what they refer to when they speak about the flood. And then when he's collected that, he'll jack the temperature up a bit, or he would have done, and he'll get a white smoke coming over, which will condense in another flask. And then he'll turn the temperature up even further, and he'll get a red oil, sometimes called a stinking red oil. And he would have collected that in another flask. And then he'll turn the temperature up even further. So we're talking something like about 600 centigrade by now. And he's getting this golden liquid come over. And this is the philosophical mercury, which technically should dissolve gold if it's done right. So he's now got this water, which he doesn't really require. He's got this red oil, which if it's washed with water and filtered and evaporated, it'll clean it up. And he's doing that 2 or 3 times. So he gets a purified red oil. He's got his philosophical mercury, and he's got all the stuff that's left in the flask, which then if he takes out and calcines, he'll get another ash, and he can wash it with distilled water and ultimately extract the salts out, which will deliquesce, attract moisture and the life force out of the atmosphere. So he ends up with his salts, he ends up with the red oil, which is the sulfur, and he ends up with the mercury, which is the philosophical mercury. And if they're all combined together in certain ratios and faffed around with, the intent is that you create the red stone, which has to be seeded with gold to get the red stone. But that's all another work altogether. But this is the direction he was going. So when he turns around and says, after supper, I went off to distill sericon, this is basically what he would have been doing, more or less. So it's quite a complex work. So later accounts, of course, especially of Dee's son Arthur, he talks about how Kelley had made gold, and as a child he used to play with gold bars. In fact, in one of them he said he was playing around with gold plates rolling across the floor. So if Arthur Dee was right, Kelley had cracked it. However, we'll get into that in a sec. But what happens? They are in Prague, and Kelley and Dee are summoned by the Vatican to attend, as the Pope wants to talk to them about their angel magic. Well, quite wisely, they decline, and subsequently, Rudolph, the emperor, comes under pressure from the Pope to hand them over, and he won't do it, and he makes out that he's banished them from his realm and they're to clear off. But in the meantime, he's made arrangements with I think it's Count Rosenberg to take them in, and Rosenberg gives them accommodation whereby they're free to get on with their angelic work and Kelley's alchemical experimentation, shall we say. And yet, despite all the turmoil that's going on and the business with the scrying, which was quite intensive, Dee and Kelley, they've had the Heptarchia, and now they've had Logar, the speech of God, as he says. And then they get a third work, which was about parts of Earth, it was called. And this is the Great Table. Could we have a picture of the Great Table, please?
Yeah, let me see if I can flash that up. Hang on, I need to share my screen. But you're sharing your screen. No, you're not. Hang on. I've opened it in a folder. Here we go. Should be able to. Which one?
It's the big coloured table. It's the middle one.
That one?
That's the one.
Okay.
That's it. So we've all got this. Right. This is what you will see a lot with Enochian. It's all got letters on it that probably mean nothing to anybody over much, unless you study this. But you've got four squares, four tablets here as one great table, and each one is related to an element. So we like the four elements as we'd all know. Now, if we take, for example, the top left, which we can see, it's pink and yellow. All right, we've all got that. That is the tablet of air. The one on the top right is the tablet of water. The black one on the bottom left is the tablet of earth, and the bottom right will be the tablet of fire. So if we go through the tablet of air, you see you've got running from left to right in the middle is a yellow line that says OROIBAHAOSPI. I don't really want to start sounding them out. And then we've got a double line running down the center of it from top to bottom. These lines, but one's running from left to right, basically are the god names, if you like, that control the energies of the tablet. This is an air tablet, so they'd be air names. Whereas if you look at the ones that's running in the middle, from top to the bottom, there's four names in there, which create the names of the seniors, which are basically the archangels. Whereas if we go to the middle line and starting in the middle of it and running out to the ends, that'll give us another two names. So there's six seniors who are, as I say, basically we may see them as the archangel of the element. Whereas if we go to the yellow line running left to right in the middle, which says OROIB, and then if we start with the letter B and we go up to its right, and then it's an A and a T. And then if we drop down and there's another A that's on the yellow square, and then there's underneath it to the left will be an I and a V on the yellow square. And then above that is an A and a H. It goes in a clockwise direction. That is the name of the king of the element. Now, so you've got the god names, if you like, names of God. You've got the kings, and you've got the seniors, which say basically the archangels. These are all called upon when working with the element. Now each square is all a bit different, but the formula is the same. So if we look at this, if we look at our pink table, which is the one for air we're looking at as our example, we see therefore it's divided in 4 sections. So we got air of air, water of air, earth of air, and fire of air. Now, the yellow lines on it give the names that are used in controlling the angels. The top line, if we take the very top line at the top left square in pink there, it says RZILA, or RZLA. They will be the angels that govern the angels under the arms of the yellow cross. I know it all sounds a bit complicated, and those names can be juggled about to create various angelic names, or they can all be reversed to create demonic names. Now, these angels will do various things like change substances. They tell the secrets of metals and alchemical workings. They do healing and medicines, produce coin, all sorts of things that you might think might be quite useful, really. I know it all sounds rather complex, and in many respects it is until you get into the mindset of it. But amongst it all, you will see capital letters. And these capital letters are the beginning of various sigils that belong to the 91 parts of the earth and the governors thereof. Because one of the things that the angels gave to Dee and Kelley was the means to communicate with the angels that govern various countries. And of course, Dee was very interested in this. In fact, in some sense, when you look at the way of the world today, you might think it's not such a bad idea now. Excuse me. So, what happens is that one morning, Rob, we can take this down now if you like. Thank you.
Nice.
One morning, Kelley is awoken by an angel patting him on the head. I suppose it was probably his early morning call. And the angel gives him this vision where what happens is that he sees 4 castles, 4 towers at the compass points, and there's a trumpet that sounds, and then there's in the east there's a red carpet rolled out from the castle. In the south there's a white carpet, and then in the west it's a green carpet that gets rolled out, and in the north there's a black carpet. And this is quite important, this color scheme, and I'll come back to it in a minute. And out of these castles come various entities. There's a king, and there's princes, and there's trumpeters, and there's various spiritual creatures bearing the names of God on banners. And this was recorded by having it cast as a gold talisman, which is in the British Museum, which you can see, because Dee's showstone and a bunch of other bits are still down there on display. So this was rather quite an important announcement that was basically being made. Now, I say about these colors because in the east it was fire, which is red, and in the south it was earth, which they put as white, and in the west it was green, air, and in the north it was black, water. Now these go against what we know today as the colors of the four elements. And so I want to have a look a little bit at the thinking behind some of this, because in medieval magical world, the world sort of started at Aries, which is when the sun goes over the equator on its northern journey. And that was considered to be in the east, hence that would fire. So if you lay the zodiac down on the ground, you therefore would have Capricorn in the south for earth. You would have Libra in the west for air, and Cancer in the north for water. So while we can see red as being suitable for fire, well, its opposite color is green, which would be Libra. But Libra, of course, is associated with Venus, which, of course, associated color green as well. If you think of that south, although we might think, well, white's a bit of an odd color for Capricorn for the earth. But if Capricorn is in the south and we think of the white heat of noontime in the summer when we get some, maybe that was their thinking about being white there. So the opposite color would be black, which would be in the north Cancer. So if that's midday Capricorn, then obviously the opposite side is going to be midnight Cancer, hence the black color. That is my understanding of why these colors were given as they were. But of that is another matter. But I bring that to your attention for something to perhaps think about. Now, one of the things with these angels, they insisted on purity and cleanliness. And as they said to Kelley in one of their visions, that he says, Archangel Gabriel says, "See that your garments be clean, herein be not rash, nor over hasty. For those that are hasty and rash, and are loathsomely apparelled, may knock long before they enter." So he's making it quite clear, purity is the key. But it wasn't all sort of how can I say? It wasn't all full on as that all the time. I mean, at one point, Kelley asks the Archangel Gabriel if the Archangel would lend him £100 for a fortnight. And so the Archangel says, "I have no use for such things, for I have swept all these from my door." So I think Gabriel wasn't going to be Kelley's banker in that sense. So by the time we get up to 1587, and they've been on the continent now for about 3 or 4 years under difficult circumstances, but pushing on with stuff. And Kelley was scrying several hours a day, frequently, even longer in some sense. So by the time we get up to 1587, I think the strain is quite clearly showing. And he decided he's had enough, and he tells the angels that he's not going to do anymore and he wants out. And they talk him around to saying, well, look, give it a fortnight, come back in 14 days and see how you feel then. Meanwhile, Dee is trying to train up his son Arthur to take over, and he's not really having much luck. So he manages to persuade Kelley to stay on. So the angels turn up in this ragged apparel. Normally turn up in their finery. And they turn up in their ragged apparel and want to know what's going to happen. Are you staying? Are you not staying? And they give Kelley this message from God that they are to share all things in common, including their wives. And Kelley's not keen on this. And when he doesn't say anything to Dee about it at first, but the angels come back and berate him for not passing on the message. And so he does. And what happens, Dee is perturbed, as is Kelley, and Dee wants to know if this is a true message or not. So basically, they say to the angels, give us a reason basically to believe this is a true message. So during one of the scrying sessions, they give Kelley a series of numbers and said, this is a message from God. If you run the numbers across the table, what we just put up on the screen a minute ago, you can work out what the message is from the letters. So they do this and it doesn't work out. It's just gibberish. So Dee turns around and tells Kelley to tell them that it's all wrong. And then the angels tell Kelley that the table's wrong and it needs to be reformed and need to change some things around on it, which they did, and then apply the numbers. And when they did, Dee's astounded because what they're getting is this message in Latin that turns around and says, basically, this is God's will and this is what you're going to do. So they agreed to do it. But the relationship, shall I say, was never the same after that. Well, not long after that, as a call from England, shall I say, calling Dee and Kelley back. Well, Dee goes back, Kelley doesn't. Kelley is well ensconced. He's been knighted, he's got lands, he's got property, he's got an income, and he's being left alone to get on with his experimentation and things he's interested in. So he's like, what the hell would I want to go back? Dee, of course, is sending information back to the Elizabethan court while he's there, where he signs himself as 007, which is just, we all know about that from the James Bond material. Well, of course, Ian Fleming, who was into the occult, who did the James Bond stuff, obviously picked up 007 from his study of Dee and Kelley. It was useful having Dee and Kelley in Prague, really, at the center of the Holy Roman Empire, passing on tidbits and information and gossip about what's going on. Because remember, I mean, this country expected any moment to be invaded by Spain and Catholic forces of Europe. So any background information on anything was always going to be found to be useful. So Dee goes back, Kelley stays. Rudolph has Kelley back and sticks him in one of his castles to work alchemically because he believes he's on the point of coming up with a philosopher's stone. Kelley's had enough and wants to escape, so he climbs out his tower on a rope he'd made, which was a bit too short, falls, breaks his leg, and from which subsequently there's various complications set in, and he dies. Dee comes back to this country. Ultimately, he ends up in Manchester. His family down on the border here in Antigrois, because the family home's still standing. They're sending cattle up to Manchester for him from off their estates. So someone's walking herd of cows all up to Manchester from off the Welsh border. It probably took them all summer. What he did with them at the other end, I don't know. Probably sold them, I suspect. If that's the case, you think, why didn't they sell them down here and just send them the money? So basically, Dee is forgotten about. He's struggling. And ultimately, he's taken in by his daughter, and he really dies in poverty, really. His library had been smashed up and looted when he was away. Various texts and books had been stolen from it. He was the guy that had the bright idea, let's have a British library, which of course we have today. So in many respects, he was a man before his time. So what happens after? Well, the interesting thing is we're very fortunate in the fact that any of these materials actually survived, because what happened is that Dee fell into obscurity, his material falls into obscurity. And one day somebody buys this chest that once belonged to John Dee, and he had it in the house for years. And then one day he gets moved and there's a rattling noise. And they find a secret drawer. And in secret drawer are piles and piles and piles of paper. His notes, the Enochian system, because he was meticulous in keeping details. And so they take them out, had a cursory look through it, didn't really understand it, stuck it on side, didn't give it much of a thought. The maid comes along, takes the top pieces of paper, uses them to light the fire. Other pieces of paper, she used to line pie tins. And so she's sort of got through about half the stack of paper before somebody realizes, hang on a minute, this might be important. So ultimately, it gets sold to Elias Ashmold papers that have been left. Ashmold recognizes what it is. He knew this is Dee's material, which he'd been looking for, although others had too. And we were very lucky that enough survived to actually put together a working system. Well, what he did, Ashmole did, he goes to see William Lilly, the astrologer, bit of a hero of mine, well, big hero of mine, really, along with Culpeper, but that's another story. And they set about working with Dee's material. And Lilly talks about it in his bio. He goes on to say he got depressed and went off to the countryside for 5 years. So I'm not quite sure what they let loose amongst themselves. We don't really hear a great deal about it after that. 1700s, there's a few people pop up who have access to it. Hans Sloane, who did the Sloane manuscripts in the British Library and what have you, is one of them. Baron Solers from Worcester, who was advisor to William III. He was another one. There's one or two other people about. Nothing really, you don't really hear a great deal about it until Mathers comes along with the Golden Dawn in 1888. Now, Mathers and the creation of the Golden Dawn, Mathers was a bit of a genius. I mean, I know he had attitude problems, serious attitude problems in many respects, but parking that on one side, in many respects, he was a magical genius. And he saw the potential of the Enochian system. Although he didn't tap into all of it, he took enough out of it for what he wanted. And we see these names being used, say, in the Greater Ritual of the Pentagram, the elemental names. That he's lifted them from there. One quick point, going back to Dee and Kelley, whether they actually worked with this material is another matter. They certainly received it and recorded it. The material that was actually destroyed by the Malayan fire, I mean, who knows what was in that? I mean, they could have been accounts of their workings. We don't know that. Could be some serious accounts there, what they did with it all. Again, we don't know. That's gone missing. So when Mathers takes over and gets access to the material, who's to say what actually it was supposed to be used as? And Mathers interpreted it and adapted it to his own ends. And one of the things he did, if you look at these tables that we had up on the screen here briefly, one of his ideas. So if we took each of these squares, which there is 670 odd, and if we create a pyramid of 4 sides on the square, and if we cut the top off so it's truncated, and if we put the letter on top of the square, and then if we put an Egyptian deity on top of that, and then if we color the sides of the pyramids in various colors relating to the elements they represent, and then if we work out where the astrological symbols go, tarot cards, geomantic symbology, and a whole host of other stuff, Mathers basically created another system out of it. But he went further than that. He said that if you visualize the pyramid around you in its right colors and symbols, and invoked the angel that it represented with the god names, the name of the king, and the seniors, and the relevant Enochian call. And then if we visualize the Enochian letter at the top of the pyramid and imagine that we're rising up through it, then we can enter the realm and explore it. So it is rather quite a complex form of path working, shall I say. And what happens is Mathers is encouraging certain members in the Golden Dawn to explore this with him, which is quite an intense way of approaching it. I've done some of it over the years because many years ago, and I'm going back 20 years now, 2005, I got very interested in Dee's Enochian system, and I made the Sigillum Amethyst Day, the big wax disc, which I was looking for tonight to show you. For some strange reason, I can't find it. It's the big wax disc with the seal on it, which the showstone sits on. Because what Dee did, he had his table of practice with a red silk cloth on it, the seal Sigillum Amethyst Day showstone on top of that, 7 talismans, planetary enzymes. Then he has 4 wax discs with the same design on it at the under each leg. And then he starts his working. Although he wasn't using a circle, he was just simply praying to God to send the angels through into the showstone. It's quite a complex piece of equipment because it took me 2 days to make the wax disc. So there's 5 of them all together. So in the way Dee was approaching it, which Mathers didn't bother with. So what I was going to say was that there is more than one approach to this, working with this material. And we can see this with Crowley and his work when he was conjuring the angels of the ethers, where he's with Victor Newberg, and they're crossing the Sahara, which is 1909. And there's the famous story where I think it's the 10th ether, where Chronozone, this demonic energy resided, and Crowley's created this triangle in the sand. He's killed 3 pigeons and put their blood at the compass points to try and fire it out with some energy of some sort, shall I say. Wouldn't be my way of doing it. You got Newberg in the circle, and Crowley's in the triangle, receiving the spirit speak through him. You can read about this. It gets quite sort of heated, put it mildly. And Crowley breaks out the triangle as the spirit, starts fighting with Newberg. Newberg drives him back into the triangle, repairs the triangle, and repairs the circle, and banishes the working. They light a big fire to purify the atmosphere in amongst sand dunes where they were working. I don't think Dee and Kelley had this in mind when they were receiving this working. So it goes to show that it is actually quite adaptable, because we see it with Anton LaVey in his Satanic Bible. Even he jumped on the bandwagon and started adapting bits of these Enochian calls. So everyone's had a bit of a go at it. Many years ago, when my wife Mary was alive, she got into using Enochian with a middle pillar. You remember the exercise that Rigardi was quite keen on, where you're building up the middle pillar of the tree of life, various points on the body, and using Hebrew names off the tree of life to activate it. Well, she had the bright idea of using Enochian, because she thought you got the top would be spirit, which is God, and then you've got air, and then it's fire, and then it's water, and it's earth at your feet. So she's using various names from the Enochian system to activate them, which she was rather quite impressed with, and thought that she was getting some serious results with. That was something that we were always going to explore, but sadly we never did, really, for one thing and another. There's only so many magical planetary hours in the day. You can't do everything. So point is that it is quite a system, because going back to 2005 when I made this big seal, I did the 18-day working where you are basically you have to wash yourself and you go through various prayers and invocations of the angels of the squares that we were talking about. And it took 18 days, 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening, to work through. So when I finished this, a couple of strange things happened. One is I nearly rented a house that was next door to John Dee's ancestral home at Nantes Groes. I got to see this farmhouse, and the woman, farmer's wife, was dead keen actually that I had it. It was a bit absurd, really. She said, "If you can't afford it, I'll even drop the price." Well, I was living up at Paris Castle at the time, and I decided that I'd stay. And after that, Geraldine Beskin down at Atlantis Bookshop rang me and said, "I'm putting on this John Dee conference. Will you come and speak?" So something that's obviously had been stirred up in the psyche. You get these synchronistic events happening, which I find always encouraging, that one's on the right vibe with stuff. So I think really at the end of the day, the Enochian system has an awful lot to offer. One quick point is that elemental rituals, you could combine the Enochian elemental calls. If anybody's into, say, Franz Barden's initiation into Hermetics, where I think it's chapter 7, lesson 7, he has you making these herbal confections, which he calls condensers, and he has one for each of the 4 elements. Like the fire one's made out of, I think, onions and garlic and pepper and things like this, and they're used to influence the particular element. Well, if you were using, say, that, you could use one of the relevant Enochian call to summon up the fiery energies to actually do what you want it to do. You could also use this, say, with elemental candle magic. So there is a big scope here, because as I go back to the Golden Dawn, they were using a lot of Enochian in the consecration of their elemental weapons. Mathers had worked all that into it. So it is a rich field to be explored. And I think it has a lot to offer. It can be complex. It can seem complex. Once you get into the mindset of it all, it's not so bad, really. And as I say, there's several reasonable books out there. Lon Duquette wrote a rather a good one. Dr. Seam Skinner, he's published quite a lot of the original material. It's always a good place to start. One or two other authors have written useful material to get you through into it, to working with it. So there's plenty out there. And I wish you well with it all.
Awesome, thank you.